an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Haunting of Hill House, Season 1, Episode 7, Eulogy. In this episode, it's time for Nell's funeral, and Nell is unquiet, as is her mother, and we get to see a little bit of what their father went through at the house, although not the fateful night. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Candace for commissioning this episode. Candace wasn't able to come to this one. She is on an errand, so she's very frustrated because she has to wait until later to watch this. But she was able to hang out with me while I live watched, I think. So that's something. Guys, this episode is really full of surprises. I have been wondering how things were going to develop with Luke because of the vision that Nellie had of him. Like, it looked from her perspective like he was pinned to the ceiling, but really it was, I think, meant to be her like looking down on him as if he were dead on the floor, because he looked dead. His eyes were open and he wasn't blinking, if I remember correctly. So I have been sort of waiting for something to happen with him, but I don't know what the warning was that she saw. Is it supposed to be that the house is going to do something to him? Is it supposed to be that she does something to him? I almost thought maybe it would be an occurrence amongst everyone, that perhaps even like a sibling did something. And it came as quite a surprise to me to see that he ducks out of her funeral the way that he does. It makes sense because clearly what he needs is money and a vehicle. He needs to travel, I am assuming, to get to the house. I am not excited about this. But it just never entered my head that he would try and go there by himself after what happened with her. I kind of thought he would know better. And this is all assumption. We don't know where he's going yet. You know, it's pretty easy to think it's the house, but maybe that is where he will wind up, and that's not where he intended to go. I don't know. Or, alternatively, he could just be trying to get some fucking smack because he just saw a vision of his dead mother trying to drag him into a grave, and he feels the need, and I can't say that I blame him for that. It's not what I want for you, Luke, but I also have to understand how this would be something that you just don't want to experience ever again anymore. I will mention that he hasn't seen the bowler hat man. So I don't know if that's going to make an appearance. We weren't in his perspective. So I don't think that he has seen it, and we haven't been included in on it. I think if he had, we would have been given a chance to also see that and be made aware that this was still around right now. But the fact that he doesn't see the bowler hat man, I have to assume is due to the fact that it's been sort of replaced by Nellie and his mom. So this is, this episode is really tough. Because first of all, we all know that funerals are just the worst. You know, there are occasions, I think, where something good can come out of them. And that is to say, if somebody was going to die because of old age, something that was sort of unavoidable versus a horrific death, like suicide or a sudden accident, something like that. Sometimes funerals can serve as a way to reconnect people who wouldn't have otherwise, but would have liked to, and just there was no real occasion for it. For example, Owen has had a lot of funerals this past year, and he had another one last week. And it was an old friend from his karate class that he went to with a bunch of people from his school. And he reconnected with some folks from that class, and they're planning to go on a camping trip like later this summer or in the fall. And it's just, these are not people that he probably would have made an effort to see otherwise. And it's kind of nice. But most of the time, it doesn't go that way, because the funerals that like the majority of us attend usually are family. And there is often so much baggage surrounding family that it turns into something much more emotionally heavy and difficult, depending on the situation, of course. And there's always something that's sort of weird about the funeral for somebody who has killed themselves. Like, because depending on the family, there can be like almost no mention that is what happened, or no willingness to face up to the fact that is what happened. And I'm not saying that you have to mention the suicide or the method of it in your eulogy. But for example, listener Mary Richter, who I met in Florida, who was a wonderful person, she took her own life a couple of years ago. And her family, in lieu of flowers, requested donations to a suicide prevention, like, organization. Which, for me, felt like a really nice way of acknowledging it without making it into the centerpiece of what was happening and, you know, sort of eclipsing who she was as a person. And all this to say, the discomfort of everybody here, not really knowing who to talk to, sort of sitting on the sidelines with people that you already know, looking uncomfortably at one another, especially with Theo and the like vestiges of whatever it was that she did the previous night. I still stand by that. I don't necessarily think anything happened, but the way that Kevin's acting, I'm like, maybe it did. You know, he's acting guilty enough that I feel like he either knows what it looked like and he doesn't feel like there's a way to explain that's going to be believable, or something actually did happen between them. And this is kind of what I mean when I talk about, like, we want it to be a good thing when we get together with people, but sometimes there's just shit that gets dredged up, and this is like new shit. So this whole episode really centers a lot more around Hugh and what happened with him and his reaction to what's going on with his kids. And we find out that Hugh is seeing his wife. And he's seeing her as she was when she was alive. It's not like he's seeing the, like, death pallor version that crawled across the carpet in the fucking funeral home or reached out of the grave and tried to drag Luke in. It is a genuine feeling of his actual wife, the spirit of her as a person before Hill House, is still with him. And there's something like, it's really beautiful. There's a suggestion of him, because he says it to Luke as if it's a coping mechanism. And, you know, I guess it could be interpreted that way depending on who's watching, but I'm interpreting it very literally, that she's like actually there. But the argument could be made that she's just really his conscience. She's just was so much a part of his life that even now she's still a part of it, and he can't help but think about what she would say in the situation or how she would want him to behave in that situation. And it's just, you know, incredibly on his mind. But I think I'm just going to go with that he's seeing her, because in this world, ghosts are real, and I just don't see any reason to complicate the issue. And this is when we get there's like two characters. One of them is brand new, and the other one we are getting a better look at this time. The first is the sheriff. I don't remember what his name. If anybody wants to help me out, I don't remember what his name is. But he is excellent. He has this energy to him of somebody who is extremely good at the good cop, but you can feel the steel under it, and that I bet he turns into bad cop on a dime when he has to. There's a real sense to him of like wanting people to be good and trying to give them the benefit of the doubt in the way that somebody who is very aware of what the worst of humanity has to offer does. There's still, I feel, an energy coming from him of wanting to like believe in what Hugh is telling him, wanting to work with him. I think he's sincere when he says that to him in a lot of ways, as much as there's an urge to see it simply as a ploy, of law enforcement trying to get him to spill his guts or see him as a friend. I don't think that's all it is. However, like I said, the energy that he gives off really feels like a person who does not fuck around. When it comes down to it, this is a man who like takes his job seriously. And I just really, Beckley, a couple people said, okay, thank you guys. Sorry if you guys hear my phone buzzing. I should really just like put do not disturb on. I always forget to do that. So this dude is questioning him in a sort of, he's very gentle about it. First of all, they had to take Hugh's clothes away because they were covered in blood, so they're evidence. They are bringing him his coffee, and he's like trying to do the whole, well, did you take cream and sugar in it? I'm so sorry, I messed it up. And I really wanted Hugh in this situation because he, as we find out later, he told Sheriff Beckley that the house killed his wife. And Beckley is so frustrated because he's like, dude, you're saying you didn't kill her. But you're also saying, you get real defensive when I try to say that she killed herself. And it's one of those things where clearly Hugh isn't in a good place. So he is trying to get anybody to understand, because this is such a wild thing that happened to him, that I think he's trying to reassure himself more than anything that he hasn't completely lost it. But the thing is, that's not a story to go with to the cops. You know, like, even if you are going to try and position yourself when you're telling people what happened, let's say he went on some talk show. I'm trying to think of something that's like the equivalent to Oprah, but I can't even think of anything these days. What is there? Daytime talk shows feel like a very alien beast to me now. But let's say he went onto some show and they were doing, he tells the real story of what happened. And he decided to go with the like incredibly lurid sounding, the house killed her, after all of this has been wrapped up and she has killed herself. That's an angle. Now, I don't think it's a good angle, but that's a safe time to do that. Things have been wrapped up and you have a whole other story to tell that you wisely kept to yourself until the cops were able to tie it all up in a bow and call it suicide. But he chooses to put forth this assertion here, and it's just a really bad call. Let's be honest, everybody. Ashley says, Good Morning America. No, Ashley, Good Morning America is like a 5:30 a.m. talk show. That's like, you put that in the background when you're getting ready for work. Daytime talk shows are usually like right around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And they're very leisurely, sort of like there's one guest that they talk to for the whole 45 minutes kind of thing. But like I said, other than like Oprah, I think of Sally Jesse. There's other shows that are all from like the 90s and 80s, and I can't think of anything today that does that, other than maybe like the Wendy Williams show. So this cop is just obviously trying so hard because he wants it to wrap up. I think he gets the sense that Hugh is really fucked up over this, and I don't think that he thinks at the moment that Hugh killed his wife. But let's be honest with ourselves. when a woman dies, it is almost always the fucking husband, boyfriend, ex-boyfriend. It just usually is a romantic partner, or like previous romantic partner, or maybe a date. It's simply, I would assume, were I hearing about this story from the outside, I would 100% assume Hugh killed his wife. I just would. And when he runs into Janet, who actually raised his kids, there's a real vibe of like, I couldn't tell if she thinks that he killed his wife, or if she just feels a way because evidently she raised his children. Because that keeps being said when his wife is standing there next to him and she's sobbing over Nellie's grave and she says, "My little girl." And his wife says to him, because he's feeling a way about it, "Well, she did raise her." And he's like, "Still." And this interests me because this means that Hugh either could not get back custody of his children, or he refused custody for some reason. And I have to assume it was could not get back custody, because I just don't see him being willing to abandon his kids. That said, what happened in that house clearly fucked him up. So, for all I know, he did refuse custody because maybe he thought he wasn't safe. If he subscribed to this idea that Steve has, which is to say that there is there is some mental illness that they're coping with here, maybe he thought that it wasn't safe for them to be around him. But I don't get that vibe. So I'm just very curious about Janet, because it's a weird thing dealing with somebody that you feel should have stepped up and didn't, or really fucked up so badly that there was no fixing it. You know, like Owen wasn't raised by his parents, but his parents were still alive and they were nearby. So they would be around sometimes. And I always have sort of wondered what it was like for his grandparents who actually raised him, to see his parents come around occasionally and not reach out and take back responsibility for their own child. Like, that you have to be kind of bitter over it, just like for the sake of the kid, if nothing else. So I'm really interested in finding out exactly what the deal is there, and whether or not she thinks that maybe Hugh killed his wife. You know, like, I couldn't help but wonder if I were in her position, even if I didn't want to believe it. So we have that whole opening scene with the sheriff, and like I said, he's very, very convincing. And they're also sort of keeping Hugh seated in a way that makes me feel like it's a tactic to sort of rattle him a little bit. And he has been told that he is free to leave if he so chooses, but he doesn't really... It's not a good idea. It would look bad for him were he to choose to do that. And we see him get up, and there's a moment at the very start where he's sort of looking off to the side and looking a little bit freaked. And I have to think that that's the first time that he's seeing his wife. Maybe not even the first time. Maybe it's just the first time that we're seeing him see his wife. But it cuts from there to him trying on ties and having a little chat with somebody about whether it's a good one or not. And then we see the camera slowly pan, and his wife is standing there. And she is wearing this like blue sundress. That's really pretty, honestly. This is one of those things that, like, I wish to God that I had the kind of titties that didn't need a bra, because if I could wear a sundress like that, I would just wear shit like that all damn day. I'm very, very jealous of people who can pull that look off. Mine is just not happening. So he goes over to Shirley's house, and Shirley's husband spent the night in the same hotel as he was in, but as it turns out, he doesn't know actually what happened. I was sort of wondering if it was going to get out. But evidently nobody has said anything to anybody else. So it's strictly between the three of them right now. And Shirley is on the phone with this place that is doesn't have the calla lilies that she ordered. And she is really fucking annoyed about it. This is one of those things that we keep seeing with Shirley, which is that she exerts her control over the things that she can. She is desperately trying to maintain some semblance of order in her own life. And I just relate a lot to that. There was an interesting comment, and I'm so sorry because I don't remember the name of the person who posted it. I think it might have been Alex Irwin. But if it was, hi Alex, and thanks for your comment. They commented about not really agreeing regarding my feelings on Shirley handling Nellie's burial, because they had been in the position where they were dating somebody who worked at a funeral home, and they were like heart set on handling the death of a family member themselves, and it led to them basically being in work mode while they were supposed to be grieving and spending time with the family. And it's the kind of thing, and he was like, all of us really asked them to not do it because we wanted them to be with us. And instead, they were just constantly having to attend to work stuff. And I just couldn't help but smile because I'm like, I mean, I understand why you guys felt that way, but that's obviously why they wanted to do that. So they don't have to be around people mourning. So they don't have to try and connect with you about this person. They are doing what they can to distance themselves and keep themselves busy in a way that is controllable, because they are not interested in coping with the emotional impact of their loss until they fucking feel good and damn ready for it, you know? And just as somebody, I've talked about this a lot. At my father's funeral, I was laughing a lot. I cried, yes, but I was also laughing because I cope with things in a way that like looks kind of callous on the outside. And as I have gotten older and learned about myself more, I've realized that it is because I am extremely sensitive. And I know that, and it's the way that I handle the fact that I'm so sensitive is finding ways to distance myself until such time as I am able to fall apart. The problem arises when you are like that and you don't allow yourself the time to fall apart ever. You decide to put it off, and eventually it just turns into putting it off like for life. And you try to just not cope with the thing. So yeah, I totally understand what they were saying their concern was. And I would even understand it if that were the case in the show. I don't think it is, because the way that people talk to Shirley about it, nobody mentions that as their concern. And from the show's depiction of Shirley working with everybody at the funeral, it does not feel like she's in work mode. It feels like she could have connected with everybody, like she would have had the time. It wasn't, she wasn't having a big elaborate affair. So I don't think that's what they were really getting at in the show, but it just makes a lot of sense to me that even if it is about, even if the concern was about, well, we want you with us during this time, that makes it even more understandable to me why Shirley would have been fucking set on dealing with Nellie, because she just doesn't connect with her family very well, you know? Like, none of them seem to really trust one another, even beyond everything that winds up happening later on when she finds out about the money and she catches Theo. So anyway, I just wanted to address that because I really did appreciate that comment, and it did give me another perspective. I'm just not sure that that was what the show was trying to do, although I see the point. So anyway, getting back to this. So he is there way too early, and Shirley is not excited about him being here. She basically is just like, if you want to fucking hang out with somebody, why don't you go and talk to Theo? And his wife is whispering in his ear that Shirley is always somebody who needs her space. That's always, like, from a child who she has been. And that he maybe should have seen that coming, and don't take it too personally and try and bear with her today, because it's going to be a really hard day. So then he goes and talks to Theo. And I really loved this scene. She tells him that she fucked up. Doesn't tell him exactly what. But eventually it becomes clear to him that she doesn't mean about the money, because that, I think, is what he assumed she was referring to initially. And then she apologizes to him and says, I should have made more of an effort. You tried. You really did. And I see now that you tried. But I think you don't understand how bad some people can fuck up until you have fucked up. And that is something that I really, really appreciated. That line is so true. It's so easy to stand on the outside and judge somebody's decisions. And, it's not even necessarily unwarranted to stand on the outside and judge somebody's actions. There are times where, of course, that's going to happen, and maybe they deserve it. Maybe we deserve it. But there is a kind of compassion that you develop as you get older, because you have had more opportunities in your own life to fuck up. And it's part of what frustrates me so much about the conversations that I'll see where people can be really self-righteous about whether or not, there's just a lot of trying to make it like bad things happening to people. Well, maybe they weren't that good a person after all. They did this, this, and that. And it's like, unless those things are truly heinous crimes, which in that case, that's a whole different issue. Everybody has done really fucked up shit in their lives. If you haven't, one, good for you, but two, I don't really believe you. If you haven't, I have to assume that you just don't realize that you have. That's sort of the vibe that I go with. Like, if you think you've lived a life unblemished by a major mistake, either there's one in your future, which good luck, or you have made a major mistake and you just don't see it for what it is yet, which maybe you will eventually, or maybe you never will. And you're just going to have no self-awareness on that. And that's on you, that's your business. So this conversation, I just really appreciated, because Theo is distant with so many people, and her making this mistake, it feels like it cracked something a little bit and allowed her dad in a way that I'm not sure the scene later on where he is comforting her after what happened would have worked as well. But we know that they have sort of reconnected a little bit by the time that happens. And I feel like it really helps with the overall tone of that scene. So anyway, this is when we get, I'm trying to decide exactly how to cope with this. I'm going to deal with the funeral in its entirety. And then I will go back to the house and the flashbacks that we see from Hugh. So first off, we have the arrival of the girl that Theo slept with at the funeral. Guys, this girl is just a mess. For me, this is a giant red flag. I personally would be incredibly unnerved by somebody that I had only seen twice, drawing a connection in the first place. How did she even know who Nell was? And how did she realize, probably it says she was survived by, and it listed Theo, but girl, she says with this accusing tone, you didn't even tell me your sister died. And I'm exactly. Why do you think that you get to insert yourself into this. She says something like, I just wanted to be here for you. No, I don't believe you. It doesn't feel like it's about Theo at all. It feels like it's about you when you do it this way. If she didn't ask for your support, then this is just sort of an invasion of privacy, in my opinion. So I just really there's a sort of sense to this scene that maybe we're supposed to think that Theo's being hard on her, or that, she's missing out on what could be a good thing. But to me, I was very much on Theo's side here. And I don't know if it's just because as a woman, I have a particular reaction. If it were a guy that just showed up at a loved one's funeral without being informed of the death in the first place, never mind being invited to the funeral, that would feel really sinister, because the kinds of men who overstep in that way tend to be dangerous. They tend to be somebody that is going to be looking into all parts of your life in a way that they were not invited to, and is an invasion. So I don't know if I'm just sort of bringing my own baggage there because of, experiences with dudes who come to workplaces and ask for your schedule from your coworkers because they want to just be there when you work. But I didn't like it, and I don't know if I'm supposed to feel that Theo is spitting in somebody's face, but I don't. I feel like this girl is being a bit of a weirdo. Anyway, it doesn't really wind up mattering. They have a moment of connection across the room eventually, and Theo sort of walks away from her and just says, fuck my day, which is kind of funny. I love when she walks away and both Luke and Hugh are left staring at her, and they just raise their hands really half-heartedly in a wave. What a weird moment. And I really liked this moment where Luke is talking to Hugh, and he's saying something about how when Nellie found out that she was gay, that Theo was gay, that she was cracking up because of the circumstances of it. And Hugh says, your mother actually guessed from when she was about 8 years old. And I loved this little motion that he makes when he says your mother. He sort of nods to the left, the way that you do when somebody's actually standing beside you. And I don't know if anybody's picking up on what that means, or they're just seeing it as sort of a relic from when she had been standing by his side. But I just really liked that motion because it's very unconscious, but also really telling. And Luke seems to be sort of touched, I think, in a way that they knew, I don't know. There was something about that moment that he smiled, and it just seemed like he appreciated that. So this is when Janet shows up, and there's a whole awkward thing. And then we have the actual funeral, and Luke gets up there and makes a speech about how Nellie, the last time he saw her, she was dropping him off in front of rehab. And she told him to go in there and get my brother back. And he says, even though I was born before her, she was always my big sister. And I thought that was a very lovely speech, and it just worked really well for me. And there's also the poem that Shirley reads. And I can't remember who it was that wrote it, but it was basically a poem about how they say she is dead, but I won't say that. She has gone away. With a wave of her hand, she has stepped into a different world, or a new world, something like this. And I actually thought that was really beautiful. That's probably the kind of poem that gets used at funerals all the time. But, maybe there's a reason, because it's lovely. So then we have the after the funeral situation. And Shirley doesn't want to sit in the car with her husband because, obviously, But when she goes to the next limo, Theo's in there, and she doesn't want to go with Theo either, which leaves her in the car with her dad. And I really enjoyed this because the ghost of his wife keeps telling him to shut the fuck up. But he will not listen. He just keeps trying to sort of push her to forgive Theo. That's like the energy of it, is this vibe of like, well, you know, lots of people do lots of things, and sometimes you just gotta sort of, you know, move on because before you know it, they're not here anymore. Like that whole kind of thing. And I really sympathized with the intention behind what he's doing, especially because he did talk to Theo and he knows how remorseful she is. But dude, honestly, now is not the fucking time. You know, like, you are not in a position with these people to give any sort of advice in any way. I understand the urge is there, but dude, not now. Fuck's sake, you know? So, at the actual graveside, everybody is throwing their handfuls of dirt on the coffin, and there's a lot of moments of, like, for example, Janet kneeling and saying, "Oh, my little girl," etc. But then we have the appearance of a ghost in broad daylight in a way that we haven't seen. And it's Luke, and he's saying, "I'm so sorry, Nellie." And as he says that, he looks up and he sees her standing there. And she says, "Don't." That's all she says. And she looks really angry. So here's my question. Is this actually Nellie? Or is this a projection of Nellie meant to fuck him up? Is this Hill House reaching out to play on his emotions from afar? Because I feel like the Nellie that Steve saw and the way that she sort of yelled and then crumpled apart, I'm not sure that I was trying to interpret what she was trying to say there. Like, it sounded like she was saying mom. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, what if it wasn't her? What if she wasn't trying to communicate with him? Not her in the sense of the way that the ghost that's sort of appearing to Hugh is his wife. Because he's seeing his wife, but then we see a version of his wife here who is very different. So I am sort of thinking that the don't, at first I thought she's trying to keep him from like wallowing in guilt. I thought she was saying, don't do this to yourself. But when she says it, and I really look at the expression on her face here, I have it paused, she looks really pissed. And I kind of feel like it's more intended to be, don't fucking apologize to me. I'm fucking dead. Thanks a lot. That's like what I'm getting from her face there. And I feel like it's intended to fuck with him. And this is when a hand reaches out and like starts to pull him into the grave. And we see his mother with her fucked up face screaming, "Stay, please stay." And she's yanking on his arm. And Steve comes over and pulls him out and is like, what the hell happened? I really hated this so much, you guys. Honestly, what bothers me the most here is the whole line of thinking behind Steve's behavior. Look, I get that there are people who don't believe in ghosts. I get that if you saw something and you really truly think ghosts are not real, that you would assume you are losing it a little bit. Something's going on with you and that you need to get some help. But the thing is that Steve doesn't jump to, we should get some help. He doesn't say, maybe we need to talk to somebody and find out what's going on and maybe get on some medication. He doesn't say, we will talk to a psychiatrist or we will he is only saying to Luke that you need to, quote, get your shit together because Nellie didn't get her shit together and look what happened. And I just really fucking hate that kind of attitude about mental health in general. There is a real, like, the implication of that is if people just worked harder, then they would get better and this stuff would stop happening to them. And I don't understand what's so hard about seeing mental health in the same way that you see physical health, because they are really the same thing. Mental health is, you know, it's affected by chemical imbalances. It's affected sometimes by nutritional imbalances. There are all kinds of very, what's the word I want? Black and white, I guess. Cause and effects that one can point to. And yet it's seen as a weakness. It is seen as something that is like brought on by the person experiencing it, like they brought it upon themselves. And if Steve had like said to his brother in a more compassionate way, I saw something too, we're going to get it looked at and figured out what's going on with us, even if our dad doesn't want to be like straight up about our family history, then we'll go above his head and we'll get it figured out. But instead, he just sort of yells at Luke as if this is just embarrassing, and it's really, really gross. Steve just always has this attitude because he is also a control freak, but it just manifests in a different way than it does with Shirley. Shirley is trying to control her environment, and Steve is trying to control people, you know? And I just have a lot more respect for trying to control your environment, because to me, it's, first of all, probably more achievable. Not actually achievable in the way we usually want, but it's more within our scope. And secondly, there's a sort of acknowledgement in that method of people being their own and it being none of your business. So the fact that Steve keeps on trying to sort of shame Luke is really, really frustrating and sad. And I hated Luke's reaction, because the way that he looks at Luke or at Steve as he's saying this, it seems like he's buying into it. That said, later on, he fucking disappears. So maybe he isn't buying it. I don't know. Well, I'm jumping to that scene. We have Hugh, and everybody apparently went back to the funeral home for like a reception. And Hugh comes up to Luke and is talking to him. And Luke is acting really shifty here. I assumed that the shiftiness was due to him having this experience and feeling really unsure about everything. But as it turns out, the shiftiness is because he just robbed his sister and he is about to fucking take off. And we have a moment that he throws his father's own words back into his face. And his dad is trying to tell him, I see your mother every day. It's a coping mechanism. You would be surprised how many widowers and widows do that. And it's nothing to be embarrassed about. My therapist says that it's perfectly normal. And it doesn't mean it's always the case. Okay? Because people see things. And I know it sounds nuts, but it's, you don't have to feel crazy, because sometimes, and this is when Luke interrupts, big boys know the difference between what's real and what's imaginary. Isn't that right, Dad? And this is one of the few moments in this scene where Luke doesn't seem quite as squirrely is the word I want. I always use that word to when somebody is like not making eye contact and sort of fidgeting in a way that implies that they want to leave. They're trying their best to like think up a reason to step away. And I just cannot overstate how much I appreciated this vibe that we got from Luke, because his dad is trying to reach out in a way that, in a vacuum, you're like, okay, he's trying to signal to you that maybe you did see something. Maybe you're not crazy. And you feel good about that. You're like, oh, look, somebody might be trying to listen to him. But Luke bringing that up again is a reminder that he tried to talk to you as a child and you really didn't want to hear it. Like, you implied that either he was lying or he just didn't know the difference, and it has stuck with him to the point that he doesn't feel comfortable talking about this with anybody anymore. And, you know, while I know it's tempting to be like, well, yeah, but that was when you were like a child and he's trying to right these wrongs. When you're a kid, well, no. When you're an adult and a parent is telling you the opposite of what they sort of drilled into your head when you were a kid, as much as you can recognize on the one hand that they aren't the same person, a lot of time has passed, they have learned, I should be compassionate about the fact that they have grown as a person and begun to realize, you can't help but feel bitterness about it. You can't help but be like, where the fuck was this attitude then? You know, it's just, you cannot help but step back and be like, wow, how different would everything have turned out if you had only been willing to listen to me in this way back then, you know? And it just, again, I can't help but compare what's going on with Luke to a kid who's being like sexually abused and he tries to tell his parents and they don't want to believe him. And this is a very similar scene, I feel, to a parent trying to like tell their kid as an adult, I'm really sorry. And that person being like, yeah, well, what fucking good does that do me now? You know, I mean, nothing. It doesn't do anything. You're just trying to sort of make yourself feel better is how I would see it, you know? So like I said, he acts like he's going to go get a smoke, and he leaves, and there is the scene later where everybody begins to realize that shit is missing. Shirley's credit cards are gone, and she was supposed to be like able to pay the caterer with that. And Theo goes out to her car, and her car is towed. You guys, even something as simple as Theo not being able to find her car, Steve cannot help but say to her, oh, you probably just parked it on a different street. Like, that is how little Steve trusts anybody. He can't even buy that Theo knows where the fuck she parked her fucking car. Oh God, he makes me so angry. There's a book that I've been listening to. Those of you who have not delved into P.G. Wodehouse, please correct that because he is hilarious. And the book that I was just listening to, which is, I think, What Ho Jeeves, a girl gets like attacked by a shark, and her engagement ends because when she's trying to tell her fiance later about how this shark tried to get her while she was jet skiing, or not jet skiing, water skiing, he tells her it was probably just a flatfish. They can be a little bit aggressive. He like wasn't there. He didn't see it, but he just decides to be incredibly dismissive of this thing that happened to her. And that's it. And she's just like, oh, we're not getting married. And to be perfectly honest, I couldn't even be mad. I was like, yeah, bitch, you tell him. Oh, Steve, you get me so angry. So they are all sort of freaking out about the fact that Luke has bailed and wondering like where he could have gone. I have to assume that most of them think he went to the house. And then we have this moment where Shirley and Steve have both left. And Theo looks at the ground, and there's like these footsteps that almost look like mold or something on the ground. Like, at first I thought it was just wet, but it looks like there is like wetness that soaked into the ground and has spattered mold. And the steps go into Shirley's office. And both she and her father come around the corner, and the Forever House that had been like that little model on the side table there is busted into pieces. And she's, understandably like, oh my God, Shirley's going to fucking kill us. We'll need to fix it. And her dad is saying, I'll fix it. And then you see this like shifting shadow, and her mother comes crawling out from around the corner. I love her dad grabbing her up and dragging her away. And Theo's scream is like piercing. Then she's gone. Mom is gone. And she has like a wound in her head. She doesn't even quite look like the same as she did when she grabbed Luke. She even looks like more rotted away than that scene. It's really awful. And when Shirley comes in later and is like, what the fuck happened here? She, of course, first sees that the Forever House has been busted apart. And poor Theo is just crumpled in a ball, like crying. And her dad's trying to tell her it wasn't us. It was like that when we got here, but I'll fix it. I can fix it. And she is looking at him like she doesn't believe it. She just seems to not. I think that she wonders if he did it again, So, now that I only have 10 minutes left, I'm going to back up and we're going to talk about the flashbacks. So, the main thing is that we're seeing the aftermath of the storm that we saw in the last episode. And Mr. Dudley, who I don't remember this actor if he's been in anything else, but he is so excellent. Mr. Dudley's working with him, looking through the house at where all of the damage could be. And as it turns out, the place is just filled with mold. And it doesn't make any sense that, first of all, the storm did not seem to hit anywhere else. The Dudleys live like a 10-minute walk away, and yet they didn't have anything more than some rain. And secondly, the mold should not have moved this quickly. It shouldn't be as filling the house the way that it is. And they wind up following the sort of sensor that he's using down into the basement. And it doesn't make any sense that it's sunk this far into the base of the house. So he talks to his wife a little bit later because he's really beginning to panic. If this place has got black mold growing in all of these different areas, there's just no way that they're going to be able to recoup their money. There's simply no way. It would take such extensive work that they would lose their shirts, as he puts it. So I feel like the energy that he gives off in the moments where he's like just found out that there's mold in the basement even, he really is excellent at portraying somebody who thinks that maybe they have just found out something that's going to completely ruin them, and they're trying so hard not to freak out because maybe they're wrong. Maybe they're wrong. But it really looks very bad right now, And Ashley says that the Mr. Dudley was in Dr. Sleep. He played Barry the Chunk. I don't remember who that is, but that has to be where I know him from. Thank you, Ashley. What is his name? His voice reminded me of Eric Bra, who does a bunch of the sleep stories on the Calm app, and I listen to his sleep stories like on the train. And by on the train, I mean not when I am on a train, but he does sleep stories about us traveling on a train. And there's like a little soft train sound effect and whatnot. So yeah, his voice kept reminding me of Eric Bra's voice. But as Hugh is talking to Mr. Dudley, there's this like scratching sound that keeps coming from the wall. And Mr. Dudley can definitely hear it too. And they assume that it's rats, which of course you would, you know. And they sort of think maybe that's what's happening to the pipes, is that there's like an infestation, and somehow they have like either chewed through or broken or, you know, done something. Robert Longstreet. That's a fucking good name. Thank you, Ashley. So Hugh calls in an expert to deal with the mold, but it's just way outside of his budget to get the kind of help that they need to. And he has to take it on himself, and involves young Steve in this project because Steve is just all too happy to help. And the thing that he's really struggling with here is that all of the blueprints of the house do not match up to one another. So trying to figure out what places have been infected and which have not, he's just at a loss, you know? And it's such a shame, guys, because you see this moment where he is talking to Olivia, and she's like, all right, I'm going to combine these plans. We'll figure it out. I will make an official blueprint, and then we will see just how fucked we really are. And it's a moment of beautiful, like, partnership between the two of them. You can see him drawing strength from her very practical, matter-of-fact attitude. And it just reminds you how solid their relationship really is when they're not dealing with this fucking horseshit. So she gives him as he's working with Steve in the basement, and they have all these sheets up, and they're in, you know, full getup. It looks like they're about to deal with COVID. She gives him a official blueprint. And when he opens it, he gets this weird expression on his face, and we don't get told for a while what's going on here. But as we find out later, there is this little shape that is repeated over and over in the blueprints, and it is the Forever House. It's the shape of the footprint of the house over and over. And I don't know what to make of that. You know, I don't know what that is supposed to mean. But when he goes to talk to Olivia about it, she doesn't remember doing it. She straight up is like, I didn't do this. And he's like, pray tell me, my good bitch, who the fuck else is out here drawing fucking blueprints? So yeah, you did. And she really begins to panic a little bit. You get this beautiful, like, first protest, and then her finally sort of admitting how hard things have gotten for her. And I think a lot of people can relate to this energy of, I have been trying so hard to hold it together, and I really thought that I was doing it. And then I saw that it wasn't actually fooling anybody. And it's like my incredible struggle is leaking out, and I have no choice but to either like voluntarily take a break or break inadvertently, you know, like those are our choices. We break either way. It's whether we choose to break and take care of ourselves, or we are broken. And I just loved this, him being like, you need to take some time off. And it is what needs doing. And he got told that maybe she should take some time off by Mr. Dudley in what is one of the most chilling monologues I have ever had the pleasure to watch. This actor deserves a lot more work. Holy shit. It's a scene where he has tried to be diplomatic, and understandably to a point, Hugh is like, it's none of your business. And he then is like, all right, I'm about to tell you a story and I'm going to get a little personal, but I need you to hear me. So that's why I'm getting personal, so that you really understand I am doing this because I'm genuinely concerned and have experience in this, and not because I'm trying to overstep shit. And he talks about how he was born here, which, wow. What's up with you, Mr. Dudley? Like, I just really, how did you not go blind and have your insides rotting and whatnot? But he is describing meeting his wife and her working here and how hard a worker she was. And that even as a kid, his mother working here, she began to do longer shifts and she was there at night, and she would come home really distracted, and that he would find her out in the woods and she'd walk out there barefoot, talking under her breath and giggling like she was talking to a suitor. And, just, you know, I don't remember if he actually says what happened to his mother, but his wife was, you know, employed by Miss, what is her name? Hazel, I think was her name. Mrs. Hill, I think. And she got pregnant, and Hazel made her keep working even though she was pregnant. And there's a real implication because, spoilers, Mrs. Dudley gives birth to a stillborn daughter. But there's a real implication that all of the time she was spending at Hill House wound up killing their child somehow. And eventually she begins to have these horrific nightmares. And he says that the kind of nightmares where he finds her curled up in the corner of the room, shaking and screaming in a way that he thought maybe she would die. That kind of like panic. Nothing. He's like, she's a brave woman. She works hard. And it was just, I really genuinely thought she might die of a heart attack or something. And so they decide that they are not going to work at Hill House after dark anymore. You know, most people would be like, hey, I'll find a different place to work. But no, not the Dudleys. They're just like, well, I guess we'll cut it down to half days. Which, dude, guys, just bail, man. Seriously. I think that it's supposed to sort of be the fact that he was born there. It's almost like he doesn't get to leave, you know? And I don't know if that's ever explicitly said, but that is sort of the way I'm feeling they mean this. So eventually there is a point where she is working with Hazel and she hears a baby crying, and she goes home and is like, runs through the woods in the dark and just leaves because it's too much for her. And he goes back with her and he can hear it too. And he says that he has no doubt, he just knew that the crying they were hearing was the crying that should have been coming from his daughter when she was born, but she never got to make that sound because she was dead. And again, the house killed her somehow, and he just knows. And he's telling Hugh, maybe your wife needs to take some time away. And Hugh, you really get the impression Hugh believes the story in a way. I can't tell. He may either just be like, wow, this guy's nuts, or he may really buy it. I think that he doesn't want to buy it, but there are too many parallels, and he's seeing the distraction that Dudley describes in his mother. He sees it in Olivia, and so he can't help but be like, fuck. But he tells her to take some time off, and when he's talking to the sheriff later, he says to the sheriff, I was under the impression that she had gone to stay with her sister. Apparently I was mistaken. So that sucks. I really want to know what happened there. And then we have the eventual discovery, because he keeps hearing this scratching sound, and he just, again, trying to control something in this world. He breaks through the brick wall, and he is going to pour rat poison back there. That's like what he's breaking through for. And he finds a body. And then we cut to the police breaking the rest of the wall open and taking the body away. And it's the same sheriff that he is now speaking to after his wife's death. And the sheriff reassures him that he doesn't have to disclose that there was a death on the premises to any buyers. And I was just like, if you don't disclose that shit, you are a literal demon. Do not sell somebody this house and not tell them that. Holy fucking God. If you tell them, then there's a really good chance somebody buys this place and turns it into a haunted bed and breakfast, and you can make money with the full knowledge that they think they know what they're in for. But don't just not say. Just don't do it. That's bad karma. Just real bad, man. As we know, it doesn't ever come to that because he doesn't sell. But nevertheless. So this is also, I forgot to mention, the thing with the fan where he busts his hand. And his son unplugged it, but he clearly doesn't believe that his son actually did it, because when he turns and looks, it's plugged in again. And so he sends Steve away because he thinks that Steve can't handle being his helper. And it's a real heartbreaking moment, because we know that Steve did what he was told and that this place is just after him. And the episode ends with the sheriff trying to get out of him. He says that there's a 3-hour time span that Hugh is refusing to account for. And can't you just tell me what happened? And we see Hugh running towards the red room, which is unlocked. Door is hanging open. There's light inside. And that's the end of it. We don't see who's in there. Obviously, his wife definitely is. But otherwise, we have no idea. So, yeah, I am way over time. I really have to wrap. But I am extremely, extremely interested in the next episode. I have no idea whose POV we're going to get. I really want to be in the dad's POV again. But more than anybody's, I want to be in his wife's. And I don't know how that works. So I guess we'll see. All right, everybody. I will see you on Friday with a new episode. Before then, I'll do a live watch, but I don't know when. So just have to keep your eyes out. And until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.